All right, everybody, welcome to a special interview that Sai did with me as a bonus chapter in the appendix of the second edition of Waypoint, which was my first book. The full title of Waypoint is Waypoint, Time Energy, Critical Media Theory, and Culture War. It's a collection of my works over the years up to a certain point before I quit what I was doing with theory, plebe, activism, academia, everything like that, and went to work at Amazon. That was all before Theory Underground and Time Energy, the book, and really everything you know now about this iteration. So I've got exciting news. Check it out. This audiobook for Waypoint, the second edition, 5 years after its initial publication, is officially coming out. So it's under review right now by Audible. It'll be available on Audible soon. And until then, you can pick up a physical copy or a Kindle copy off of Amazon. So get your copy of Waypoint. And by the time you're watching this or listening to this, chances are the Audible edition, read by Sai, the interviewer throughout this conversation, should be available on Audible. If not, it'll be there very soon. Finally, before we kick off this interview, the last thing I have to let you all know is that I made a game called Canon, the liberal arts trading card game. It's like Pokemon for philosophers, but better, which is to say, it is the liberal arts canon trading card game to rival Magic the Gathering. Or, as Matthew Stanley recently put it, it's not really a game. It's a technology for engaging with other people. It's a new way of learning. It's a new way of engaging. And he also said it's a lot of fun. So shout out to Matthew. And thank you to everybody who's been saying positive things about this. If you would like to watch a full video of me explaining it, that was released recently. You can check that out. Link down below. And then finally, there's a Substack post about it. You could read up on it. The main reason I have to let you know about my trading card game, though, is because Canon Fest is at the end of August. If you want to play in the first official tournament for Canon TCG, then you're going to want to be there. If you want to just play casually or even just get some cards for collector's purposes, just because it would be cool to have foil Plato, foil Marx, Plato, Einstein, foil meaning like collectible, special edition, shiny, special kind of collectible card. It's going to be worth a lot of money someday, right? Well, if you want to get your hands on some of these cards, the best way to do that is to be at Canon Fest 2026, August 27th through 29th. Come early, stay late. Applications down below. It's also available in that Substack post I told you about and pinned to the top of the comment section of the video, the longer form video where I go into this game. Yeah, check it out. Go look at that. That was the message from our sponsors, Canon TCG. Thanks for listening. Let's get this interview on the way.
This is Sai Ewald. I'm happy to be here with Dave McKerracher. And Dave here is the author. Hey, Dave's the author of Waypoint, Time Energy, and also the editor of 3 Underground Volumes 1 and 2, with 3 on the way this year. Also a husband and soon-to-be father, and now farmer. I'm sure there's many other titles I'm forgetting at this point. But I wonder if that's how you would characterize yourself now. It's
you forgot mediocre Renaissance man. Yeah, I like to say farmer, philosopher, husband, father, not in that order.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would be the proper order of that? It changes every day. It depends on the time of day, really, you know?
Yeah, you wear many a hat, and you do them all fairly well, it seems. I'm very impressed. I really am. And, really kind of an aspirational model for us who are either autodidacts or academic dropouts or just basic, your basic line cook or your warehouse monkey, if you will, just kind of trying to get through the day and having something stimulating to listen to. So I'm really pleased to have this opportunity to interview you.
Cool.
Yeah, and I guess I'm wondering about the transition from Dave, the normal guy who no one had heard of, to at one point being at Duquesne University and hearing a lecture that changed your life. I guess I want to know more about what it was that you heard there, kind of. For those of you who don't know, the guys who run the podcast, The Partially Examined Life, put on a lecture there that Dave heard, and something about that struck you, and I'm wondering what was there.
Yeah. So The Partially Examined Life is a really amazing podcast for having done so much for internet philosophy, like people doing philosophy on the internet. Their podcast is with Mark Linsenmeyer, Seth Paskin, Wes Alwyn, and Dylan Casey. And the four of them were at Duquesne. They were on a panel. It was a keynote. I went to this conference that was hosted by the Pittsburgh Continental Philosophy Network, I think it was called at the time. I don't think they did a lot of conferences. They may have not done any since then, but they definitely had a great one then. And there were several things that happened that stand out in my memory. And, I was an undergrad in college. I was a non-traditional first-generation student. Thankfully, I had a really cool professor who told me that first with the college, when I was at community college, and then later at the university, he said, look, there's always money to travel to conferences. There's always money. The department has money. The college has money. There's other offices that also have money potentially. And so if you send emails out to the different places and to the chair of the department, to the dean of the college, et cetera, and you just say, hi, I got my paper accepted into this conference. Will you fund my travel, so I can represent the college, then they'll give you some money. And when I found that out, I was just like, let's go. Okay. So I started instantly always looking for any opportunity that I could get my hands on to go places. And, it was really thanks to Dr. Ed Cates, who was a philosophy instructor at North Idaho College, who got me thinking that way. And it was thanks to him getting our philosophy club to the Forest Grove undergraduate philosophy conference in Oregon a couple of years in a row, that I then, in my the later part of my undergrad when I was at Boise State, I started doing it everywhere all the time. And so really that was a formative process in itself, just exploiting to the nth degree the travel funds available. And the way that they explained it to me was well, that money's going to go to something, but probably just something that doesn't really matter nearly as much as getting you to a conference. Everyone seemed really all about getting me to these conferences. They just cared about it so much. Mm-hmm. And for me, just as someone who had only ever worked dead end jobs, I was like, are you kidding me? There's just all this money. So I know that's not even the question you're asking. The question you're asking is about partially examined life, but it's this was the sort of trajectory and sort of rationale that even got me there in the first place. And
every time I go to one of these things, I am totally out of my element in some city I've never been in, trying to figure out transportation and everything. Okay, and so with all that said, the guys at the Partially Examined Life podcast were all really nice, you know. They were very down to earth, and then they do this whole panel on the topic of public philosophy. You could probably still find it on their podcast. It's an actual episode you can go listen to. I might even be in the Q&A section of that episode. I'm not sure. But I think what the reason that really impacted me was because I was like always wondering, what am I going to do with philosophy? You know, because of course everyone asks you that, and you're going into all this debt and you're working and just trying to get by. And you're like, why am I doing this? Like, I know I'm interested in it, but what can you possibly do with it? And you know, telling people, oh, I'm going to teach, is never really satisfies anybody. And of course, it doesn't really satisfy me either, because looking forward on this horizon of possibilities, I'm like, will I really be able to do this teaching like that? It's maybe, you know, maybe. And with the Partially Examined Life guys, they always say in the intro to their podcast that they're just for guys who got their masters in philosophy and they were going to continue for doctorates, but they all thought otherwise and decided to do other things. And so, you know, they're an example then of early leavers, like, you know, they exited, you know, and I think they might have done that in 2009. So, you know, it really goes back a long ways. So yeah, that was sort of foundational. Just the idea of doing philosophy in public, for the public, not as an elite thing that is meant to be removed from the general populace, you know. And I think they may have brought Hannah Arendt into that episode as well. And of course, she's a big thinker of the public. I don't know how much they might have touched on this in my own research later, you know, probably, you know, 5 years later. I was reading her on revolution, and in that work, she talks about public happiness and how for the founding fathers, the pursuit of happiness was not supposed to be a private endeavor. It was supposed to be an opportunity to step out onto the stage of history and make a case for the direction that we're supposed to be going, and actually have an argument with other people, and it to be like you are in the presence of peers, and your voice actually gets to have a potential impact in convincing other people. And it's a very sort of Greco idea, right? Like this I was going to say Greco-Roman, but no, it's just Greek. You know? I mean, the Romans, obviously, they were trying to do it in their own way, but it's for Arendt, it's especially this Greek idea of freedom. And it's a freedom conditioned by access to the public, where if you were, barred access to that stage of history and that ability to do politics, then your freedom would actually probably be seen more like slavery to them. Like, they don't consider that freedom. That's why Socrates would rather die than leave Athens. You know, it's you know, they were all like, you could leave, you could escape, and he's like, yeah, but I'm not gonna. And the reason he's not going to is because freedom for them had to do with this thing that Hannah Arendt is calling public happiness, and it's just that ability for what in Waypoint I call potential recognition, right? So yeah, I think that was a pretty powerful
recognition
thing.
Absolutely, yeah. It seems formative for you. I wanted to know more about that, because I really like your angle as like what I would call a plebeian theorizer. I think it is important that, as I think you've mentioned before, that philosophy and theory do not drift into a niche that becomes fetishized, that becomes removed from people. And I think anybody who's either self-taught or has gone their own way has learned that the hard way, that, you know, people who have a bunch of letters at the end of their name may not want to talk to you necessarily about these things, even though ostensibly that is their field or their job, just because you're not credentialed. So you had your master's, you decided not to pursue your doctorate, but you were an adjunct teacher for a while. And it sounds like the paradigm was you had showed up wanting to teach someone who wanted to learn, but the first hurdle you ran into was trying to convince students of the value of the act of reading itself, and that was more or less discouraging for you. Why do you think it is so important that people read, but not necessarily read with the purpose of instrumentalizing what it is that they read immediately? What is it about? What is about that? And then I also, you're the theorist of the worker with earbuds. So I also wanted to know whether or not you think that AI readers, these machine readers that we are proliferate now, whether or not those operate in the same register as sitting with the real book. If we lose anything there.
Yeah. Does listening to a PDF by Speechify, count as reading? I call it reading, but it's not the same as what we tend to think of as reading. What we tend to think of as reading is also not real reading, though. So, it's one of those things where it's like people are like, oh, well, this is a disgrace. People are listening to robot readers. They should go back to only reading a book one time at the, reading comprehension level of like a middle schooler from, the 1930s, and then and never progressing beyond that, and never having access to any of the primary voices of any of the greatest minds from the history of the liberal arts canon. Like that's what people want to go back to, so, but then even then it's still like you're reading silently, there was this one guy, he would always say, I can't really read books. Whenever I read books, I move my lips. And he'd always say that, and it was a really weird thing. I was always like, what does that have to do with anything? And but then I get this image of him like trying to read a book, and he's like moving his lips. He's like, and I'm just like, I don't know why I think that's so funny.
Wasn't it Thomas Aquinas that was the first like the first silent reader? That is to say, a long time ago, right?
Yes. That's exactly where I'm going with this. Exactly. To say, this, so that guy, he always said that thing about but then later I find out the thing about Thomas Aquinas being like the first guy to read quietly. And it's like, oh, so wait, that wasn't normal, right? So what is normal reading? This idea that, the Speechify or any other sort of, text to audio reader would be unnatural, and that reading quietly in your head is natural. That is ideological. It needs to be challenged. We need to actually it needs to become something that feels weird. That kind of reading that we used to do, we need to look at it and go, well, what's really going on there? And then so part of what we've done at Theory Underground is really encouraging this approach that says, read out loud with other people. It's not the only way, but also it is a classic tried and true way. And then more importantly is reading for rereading, right? So it's like, with books, I think that we should be polyamorous. You should be able to take many books out on dates, and you can even take multiple out on a single date. It doesn't actually mean that you have to read one only, and you ignore the other ones. And you also don't have to read multiple when you're there, but you just do what is enjoyable, like genuinely just reading for enjoyment. And maybe have a book that you've read many times that you're like going through again, and then you have other books that you're reading for the first time. Like it's I know you're Deleuzian. It's very like Deleuze and Guattari at the very beginning of A Thousand Plateaus, when they're talking about like their idea is like it should be a lot more like a record. Reading a book should be like you just put the record on. It's one of my favorite things about them, actually, is that sort of mindset. They kind of lay the ground for this audio listening revolution. And in the theorizing of the worker with earbuds, so does Deleuze. Or sorry, I just said Deleuze. So does Derrida. Derrida also is thinking this through in his Of Grammatology when he's thinking about the arche writing, the kind of writing that comes before speech, right? When you're thinking something through, and it's like the reading that you're doing, the writing that you're doing, the speaking that you're doing, these things are not easily separable. They're all a part of this process, right? Well, thinking about that, and this idea of like with books, we should be able to be a little bit more like, hey, I might take this on a speed date, and I might decide to never go out with it again. Mm-hmm. But then again, I also might realize what it's good for and what to come back for later. And that, I think, is one of the crucial things, is like learning to read for the rereading is sometimes learning that this is not worth rereading for you right now. And maybe you can't really see why it would be later, but at least you get that territory covered. And if you don't have the mentality that says this is a first pass, then you never actually get there. And you probably get bogged down reading things because you're trying to get everything out of it on the first pass. And it's like, it's a first pass, man. Why are you trying to get everything out of it? It's like if you go to a new city and you're like telling the taxi driver, hey, stop, hold on. I got to look at everything on this street. It's like, no, just go around, man. You'll get the lay of the land eventually.
Yeah, I made a huge mistake when I read Thus Spoke Zarathustra for the first time. I spent an entire year reading it. I don't read that slowly. I read slowly on purpose, thinking I can't miss a thing. Of course, I missed 90% of it, surely, even though I read it slowly. And that's really good advice, just to remember that, you can read it again. You can read it quickly. You don't even have to take notes. I wonder, though, do you annotate? Do you annotate your books, or are your books pristine? Do you like to have notes on the side, or do you take notes in line?
The books that I've read the most are definitely the most marked up. But, a book like Being in Time, I bought a new copy just because I didn't want to have to see the unbearably embarrassing thing where I was like practically everything.
Yeah,
and it's like,
yeah.
It's like, did that help me?
My friend gave me his copy of a Sherry Turkle's Alone Together, and it was, I think he said, well, the ADHD meds had kicked in right about then in high school, and I was just, the highlighter was going, just crazy. You once said that, speaking of enjoyment and your reading, I think you once said, and this is where I first heard about you, was on a pod with One Dime. I think it was last May. And I think you said there that your Juissance was in theorizing or in philosophy. And I just wondered if you could provide us with a definition of that, since that word maybe has a contested definition. And then, I guess I want to know why you specifically think that you were drawn to answer these big questions, and whether or not there were any formative irritations or puzzles that you were trying to work out when you were younger, or maybe some early formative political experiences. I think we're the same age, so probably we encountered the same things. But Juissance.
Oh, Juissance. Yeah. So, because you said it was contested, and then I was thinking, okay, we're talking about Juissance, right? Not philosophy itself. Doing philosophy, I do get enjoyment from it, right? And why is that? Or, the why is that is even more complicated. But just to address, what is Juissance? So desire and drive, they're not the same thing in this sort of register. When we're using the term Juissance, we're doing it in a Lacanian way, right? Of course, Bataille talks about Juissance, and Lyotard talks about Juissance, and Levinas talks about Juissance. But no, it's the Juissance of Lacan that makes it so that we in the American Anglo sphere, when we say Juissance, we're always making this reference to Lacan. And so and for me, what the real Lacan is actually saying is a lot less important than the way that this term is being used by Lacanians insofar as they've been able to make what they do intelligible to me. So, you know, I'm not trying to get
always
to
the qualification.
I'm not trying to say like I have Lacan figured out. I'm just trying to say, as far as I understand it, largely thanks to Mikey, the difference between desire and drive here is like desire has a lot more to do with the pleasure principle, and drive has a lot more to do with undermining it. And that, you know, the pleasure principle is it's for, you know, homeostasis, equilibrium, whatever word you want to use for rest, peace, relaxation, even happiness. It's the day at the beach that you're always fantasizing about. It's like, oh, if I could just be caught up on my bills and actually just lay in the sun and like leisurely like look at that thing that I've been wanting to look at, or catch up with that person I've been wanting to catch up with. We have this fantasy of us at that state of pleasure, and that's the pleasure principle, right? So we pursue that. But then, of course, that it becomes this way that we constantly give ourselves trouble because, well, it turns out we get enjoyment from undermining that. We get jouissance from undermining that. And so desire and drive are on this Mobius strip. They're constantly in tension with one another. That fantasy that goes unfulfilled, it's sort of orbiting your objet, right? Like this unfulfillable, unsatisfiable sort of hole within you, right? That's the idea, right? And jouissance becomes impossible for us to see. It becomes impossible for people to think about unless, for whatever reason, they've been exposed to Lacan. Like without this theory, you don't start to think about it really. And this is the value of it, for real. Without it, you know, think about all of the great philosophers and theorists of subjectivity, and yeah, none of them pick up on this way that we get off on undermining our happiness. And this getting off on, anyone who hears this for the first time is probably just like, okay, yeah, really? Really? And I say, yes, really. That's what I'm saying. It is that important once you start to think about it. But we have to use some concrete examples. And I love to use the example of road rage. Nobody thinks that they're getting off on road rage, right? Nobody's going to say, I love getting angry while in traffic. But there's two kinds of people on the road getting upset. One is driving the speed limit and taking a long time to change lanes, maybe even driving slightly under the speed limit. That person thinks, I'm a very safe driver. I do everything legally. And they get enjoyment by actually obstructing the flow of traffic and being correct, but sort of in this weird way where it's like you're kind of correct, but you're taking it to such an extreme that you're actually missing the real point, which is that to be a part of our society, we all transgress the law in a sort of agreed upon way, which is called go 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, asshole. Everyone knows this, right? And so that's where you get the person who's like, what's wrong with people? They don't know how to drive. And then that person's driving like a maniac because they're overdoing it. And so you have the person who's like, they're not just going 5 miles an hour over, you know, they're actually like, they're swerving in and out and around cars, and it's reckless by my standards. And I'm a pretty, I would say, medium driver. I'm not that slow person. I'm not that fast person. I'm just trying to be aware. And you get these people who are like, you know, swerving around. Okay. Now you got the slow person, you got the fast person. Both of them are flipping each other off. Both of them are probably talking the ear off of their poor kid in the other seat, just being like, what's wrong with these drivers? Point being, they're getting off on it. And whenever someone's getting off on something that gives them this kind of enjoyment or jouissance, it's not just that it's, you can't just think about it as like an empirical thing. You can't just think about like, oh, look, they're getting upset. They have this excitation inside of them. They're feeling that. And then you can't just make a one-to-one connection between jouissance and that, because there's this symbolic level to it. Enjoyment in jouissance. This is always somehow related to undermining your symbolic position. Okay. And so I mean, just think about being a guy and losing your cool in traffic. You are undermining your symbolic position of being a man, because a man doesn't get upset about such things. A man keeps it cool, calm, and collected, creates a sort of sense of security in those around him. Like don't worry, we can kind of trust that he's got this all under control. Okay, but now he's acting like an impudent, like teenage brat. Like, what is this? Right? So anytime that we see somebody getting off on something that is seemingly displeasurable, and you're like, but you're kind of getting something from that, aren't you? You also have to think like, yeah, they're undermining something in some way for themselves, aren't they? And then if you get to know that person, or if you already know that person, then yeah, you probably will find out, or you're already well aware that that person has some kind of a fantasy of who they are or who they want to be. And this thing that they get off on is totally undermining that, totally contradicts it. You can just think about Christians, and a lot of Christians that I know, it's like peace, love, hope, grace, forgiveness, the fruits of the Spirit. And then, of course, like, what are the actual affects that they carry around? What is the actual kind of mindset that they get into? And especially certain tendencies get really cranked out on resentment and judgment and all of this other stuff. And it's like that stuff that, you're clearly getting off on also goes a long ways towards undermining your whole testimony. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then we can easily do this with the left. We're not going to right now. So for right now, I'll just say, how does that all relate to philosophy for me? Okay. And so, I mean, philosophy, insofar as I've taken it up, and I have in the last 15 years, to be the challenge or critique of doxa, common sense, you're necessarily going to make waves, burn bridges. There's all kinds of ways that things get complicated because you're into philosophy. And so, being a contrarian, being an edgelord, those things are problems. It's way too much fun, and it's a lot of fun to pee all over somebody's sacred idol. And that's not good. I'm not saying it's all good. It's actually, it can be a huge problem. And to some extent, I have done that where I've regretted it, right? Also, to some extent, I think I've found a sort of sweet spot where it's like, yeah, but I also have to sort of filter from my life certain people otherwise getting attracted. And with philosophy, you can attract a lot of people who they like to think about big ideas, but they won't really push the boundaries, and they like to stay in the safe zone or lane. And if that's fine, but if you surround yourself with too many people like that, after a certain point, you find yourself not really able to have real conversations anymore. It's like people are reacting to the possible ways that something could get misconstrued by some third party, and more than actually being a human being and having a real conversation with you.
Yeah, you mentioned in a conversation with me about the phrase "a bull in a china shop," and I thought more about that in the weeks since, and I think it's a perfect metaphor, because what is fine china? It sits in a cabinet on display, doesn't it? And it only comes out occasionally for guests, to be paraded for guests. And sometimes the china does need to be smashed. Although I do wonder then, because obviously I'm interested in the life of the mind too, and that's why we've met. And how does one ground oneself then, and not be caught between like a prohibition on something, or in a loop of transgression for its own sake, in a sort of infantile sort of reaction to what you can rightly characterize as stupid behavior. People who are not thinking, and you want to break them out of their trap. But how do you do so ethically? How do you know? I guess this goes back to kind of we were in lecture with Samuel Longcar recently. To what do you bow? That is to say, if you're a pious man, to what do you bow, and how would you know? What's your guiding star there, I guess?
Well, first of all, I haven't been very pious very often. Not in my life, I've not been a very pious person. Though I think, maintained some sense of wonder, and I think that it's important to kind of double down on having a sense of wonder for things. And one of the worst things I think that can happen for the life of the mind is to get too taken up with answering questions as opposed to living in or through questions, right? And so you can become that kind of person who's wanting to run around and collect all the little answers. Like, you'll get some kind of a gold star for doing that. Like, oh, I'll be the person who knows all the things, and I'll get the gold star. And it's just, to me, it's a consequence of our weird schooling system where people think that's what knowledge is in the first place. But I mean, for me, like, wonder means really sitting with the fact that no amount of words that people assign to things actually make those things less interesting, if you really think about it. It can, I guess, in a sort of superficial way, foreclose your ability to think deeper about those things. But, I think good philosophy opens up the possible. And so, just think about, like, when people say that love is oxytocin or, this dopamine. Yeah. They do this neuroreductivist thing where they talk about, they're talking about, you do it for serotonin, you do it for dopamine. And it's like, okay, B.F. Skinner, fascinating. Yeah. So everybody's a behaviorist now, and they've all figured out that we're all just brains and vats, apparently, And or not even brains and vats, but like that we're just programmed worms or like slightly leveled up versions of those. And it's like, well, if, people talk about how you can induce spiritual experiences by taking psychedelics, you can induce loving feelings by taking MDMA, you can induce, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, they want to use that to somehow invalidate the natural emergence of that experience when it's not being artificially provoked by stimulants. And so it's like, that's a weird little bait and switch, because just because you can poke certain parts of your brain and induce something doesn't mean you actually understand what all goes into the natural occurrences and emergences of those experiences, say a spiritual experience or the experience of falling in love, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, speaking of falling in love, I wonder, I feel like there's this balance between falling in love with the thinker of the past, and then, of course, there is a great danger in becoming exceptionally attached to a specific thinker of the past. For me in my circles, that might have been Karl Marx or Lenin. And so I wonder, I feel like you need that love to attract you to the act of learning and of uncovering what has been. But at the same time, you have to learn to detach. And I wonder, how do you strike that balance? How do you know, to follow? How far do you follow before you fall down the well,
Yeah, I guess I might be the worst person really to ask this question to, because I don't feel like I get super stuck in a thinker. I just feel like it's always been an annoyance that every one of those conferences I went to, people are like identifying like as a Deleuzian, as a Marxist, as a Hegelian, as a whatever. And it's like, okay, but who are you? It's like what you're, it's like so many different things happen when a person says that. It's like, well, okay, so, but do you actually think that that's the case? Or is it that you're performing the role of a person who is supposed to be a serious student of that thinker? So, and then of course, there's like this really interesting claim to authority that's always being made. So it's like when you say, well, as a Deleuzian, I think this. So you understand Deleuze now? Okay. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
You know, okay, I guess so. I guess I just have to believe that you get Deleuze. That's quite the
Also,
quite
there's
the
no way
tall
to know
order.
why someone would identify as that, right? If you just come in and you say, well, I'm a Marxist, you don't really get any impression as to why are you a Marxist? For me, my question is often nowadays, after having been in movements for quite some time, my first question is, well, what is your relationship like with your parents or your grandparents?
Yeah.
Because it really reveals a lot, right? Like I think you in your past, you discussed this in a past interview. You know, this sort of moving through stages of enlightenment and realizing, all right, I don't want to do what my parents did. I'm gonna totally rebel. There's a lot to this seesaw action. I myself have felt this. My father was a man of faith, and so of course I had my strong agnostic phase. But yeah, it always feels like an obscurant move to say I'm a Deleuzian. Like, I bet Deleuze wouldn't have even liked to hang out with you. Let's be honest. He is a Parisian intellectual, probably. It's just something to keep in mind for us. But I do think there is a value to falling in love with a thinker for a period of time, at least. But the way
let me actually. Sorry, I only said the first half there. I do have to say though, I might be the worst person to ask, in the sense that I don't ever just fall in love with one person and then stay with them deeper and deeper and deeper. And so I can't really give that person advice except to say, hey, it's not necessary. There might be some other path. And for me, that means, read other people, Now, if you get really into one person for 5 years, I could see that being really into that person helps you read their whole corpus and then a bunch of the people that inform them. And then it helps you kind of think things through, and maybe you get to some other position then where you're able to come up with something that's a bit more your own in the aftermath of all of that. But for me, I'm a lot more into having several people that I read against each other. And so for me, it's always been, Marx, Heidegger, Levinas, especially in the last 5 years, Lacan, Bourdieu, increasingly Baudrillard, Arendt. I love these people, but also I really like these under hyped or underappreciated, celebrated American people who are very boring to the people who only like to read hard books. Like if your whole thing is being able to like show off, like look at how hard the books are that I read, well then you're not gonna like Neil Postman much, even though he's just as awesome as Baudrillard. Okay, he's right. Awesome. But he's an American. He doesn't have that allure that the French have. But so does Wendell Berry and John Taylor Gatto and even Sherry Turkle, who you mentioned. She might be like this sort of bestseller kind of author, but no, first of all, she did like actually study in the 70s in Paris, around all these Lacanians, and she wrote a whole book about the politics of psychoanalysis, which is that's itself is fascinating. The fact that she is referencing Lacan and Levinas in these sort of bestseller books, and I think a lot of people miss that with her. She's incredibly cool. But I guess what I'm trying to say though is, I don't just read this super high shelf, arguably elite kind of theory. I also read more popular works, and I read anything that's interesting, and I don't just read the challenging stuff. I read the easy stuff, and then I always am like reading it against. I read everything against everything else, And that's not to say I'm doing it like in a in a forceful way. Like, for instance, I don't read Sherry Turkle against Levinas and Lacan, obviously, and or Arendt. I think that her framework with the virtuous circle in reclaiming conversation is a great way to kind of bring together other projects, right? Which you see me do in Waypoint. Mm-hmm. But the key, anyway, for me is just to, get into somebody and slipstream with them. And so, like, the slipstreaming metaphor is, geese do it when they fly into V formation. Race cars do it when they get inside of the what do you call it? The airstream of another race car. But basically, it's like the other person is breaking through a barrier. It makes it easier for you to kind of catch up, and so you're able to do more with less for a little while, and then you can whip around them. And, maybe I'll never whip around any of these people, and I'm not trying to say that I will, but I am saying that I can kind of move from one to the other and use their special insight, their energy, and their charisma. Or I almost want to say there's like a sort of mystique, allure thing going on with every one of them. And as I've been developing Canon, the trading card game, the liberal arts trading card game, one of the big things is just realizing, like, every one of these people is absolutely amazing and someone that you could spend the rest of your life reading about, writing a biography about, whatever, whether we're talking about Hildegard of Bingen, Francis Bacon, Plato, Shakespeare, it doesn't matter. There's this like Leonard Euler is this incredible figure, just incredible. And they're all these really cool people. The danger is that you get sucked into one of them, and then you only go to conferences where people are just reading that person's work, and you fall into the specialist trap. And I think academia wants you to do that. But I think for us, for workers with earbuds, it's a lot easier to be like, I'm not going to just spend the next 6 years trying to write a dissertation about this one person. No, I'm going to dive into a bunch of this person's books and books about this person, and then I'll jump over to something else, and maybe I'll bounce back to this person, 3 months later. And so I think we get to kind of have our cake and eat it too. I think there's obviously benefits to be gained by writing your dissertation about one person, spending 6 years on Spinoza or whatever, sure. But there's obviously benefits also to what I'm describing. And the fact is what I'm describing is not a path laid out for you at the university. And in fact, what I'm describing was impossible before the audio listening revolution. What I'm describing is new, it's cutting edge. You and I, we're pioneering it.
Yeah, I love that about Theory Underground, which we'll talk about maybe later on. But I just really think it's so important that what we take from the contradictions of our current situation is we must look for the new avenues, the new exits, the new escapes from these, seemingly stuck conditions. And one of them is that, your boss doesn't know if you have an earbud in most of the time. We have all these digital ways to keep a massive library. Anna's archive, is a gift from God. And so I'm indebted to all of the people on that project. And I know you are
100%.
Too. And so it does make me wonder, though, speaking of Theory Underground, speaking of the virtuous circle and solitude and solicitude as our themes in Waypoint, most of your work that you do is coordinated through digital networked communication, online platforms, and you even unfortunately have a Discord. So as we all know, these forms of communication really cheapen communication itself. And I think it also undermines real relationship building, right? Because we can always just turn our devices on and off. Or I was busy. Oh, my internet went out. Whatever it is that you just become unavailable, you can just disconnect, or you can burn out for a while, or whatever it is. You're not living in community with people. This isn't the the global village that was promised necessarily. It's something quite different. So is being required to do this online kind of nauseating for you, or is it, have you figured out a way through it?
Yeah, I am kind of post despairing, meaning that I think I spent a lot of years in a pretty resistant kind of headspace, and maybe I've just caved, but I also think I'm doing better and I'm better at it than anyone else. And I mean that. I don't want to sound too cocky or arrogant or whatever, but look, there's a spectrum here of people who, on the one side, they have the attention spans of goldfish. Okay. I mean, they really can't follow anything that you're saying if it's not this really tiny rut that they like to stay in. And, they basically work and then they relax. And the interstices of their day are filled with scrolling reels. Okay. And they have the attention spans of goldfish. And if you watch a goldfish, you should know exactly what I'm talking about. The look in their eye is the look in these people's eyes. Okay, so that's the one side of the spectrum. The other side, you have people who they don't really text, they don't respond in a group chat, they don't like things. They do go on the internet from time to time, but they don't ever engage. And maybe they go on more than you even know, but they never engage.
Yeah, they're lurkers. I was a lurker for many a year. Yes, I know what you're talking about. They're lurking. Exactly. And so that, in that sense, they're consuming, but they're never actually creating anything. Of course, they'll say that they're still creating by, it's the data that's being harvested off of them. Sure, yeah, but okay, you know what I'm talking about. You're passively, you're interpassively, or you're pseudo-actively doing things, but you're not doing anything. Okay, well, I'm not trying to say that there's a spectrum of people on the one side with the attention spans of goldfish who are always on their phones, and on the other side, whatever I just described. No, on the other side, we're really getting at is the kind of person who maybe they get on the internet sometimes, but for the most part, they're out doing things. They're doing a lot of running, rock climbing, bike riding. Maybe they just play a lot of video games, let's be fair. Or maybe they just work a lot and they're a parent and but somehow they stay off their phone for the most part. And, they tend to have a better attention span, but I'm not so sure that they're better at being in our world. Okay. And, it's not just a being out of the loop from what's going on. I think there's kind of arguably no way to really keep up with everything anyway. But what I'm a lot more interested in is sort of paving this way where, you use it, you're not being used by it nearly as much as you are using it. So first of all, it's not that you're not being used. Of course you're being used. You're always being used. But the tables have turned somewhat in the sense that, you're using it a lot more than it's using you, at least relatively speaking compared to other people. And then, let me give you all an example of what I'm talking about. So it's I go on my phone throughout the day, all day, every day, but also I'm listening to books and I'm writing. Okay, I write pieces on my phone. Think about that piece I just wrote on A Christmas Carol up on the Substack. That's just an example that comes to mind as a piece that I love, that I wrote. And it was a lot of fun to write it. And I wrote it in a single sitting and I did it on Google Docs. Just sitting on a couch or something. I was comfortable. I was hanging out with a puppy. There were people around and I'm just writing. And it's it would be really easy for a person to project onto me because they hate their relationship with their phone and they feel guilty because when they're trying to be around other people,
they're on their phone, and then all of a sudden, like, they get off their phone and they actually want to associate with other people, but now those people are on their phones, and so they never feel seen or heard, and whenever they try to see or hear other people, like, there's this breakdown. And so it's like, yeah, okay, I totally, that sucks, but also, like, that person sometimes projects onto me. And it's like, no, I just wrote like a piece. Like, what do you want me to pull out a typewriter and sit there and type it out in a cabin for you? I wrote a piece, all right? And so, and it's not just a piece. It's like it's a real development in my thought, in my thinking from over the last 15 years. It's not just some random, I did a blog. It's like, no, this is the kind of piece that really ties together so much of the stuff that I've been researching. It ties together my previous books. It kind of shows the trajectory for where things are going with the philosophy of stewardship and home economics and intro to theory, blah, blah, blah. So all that to say, yeah, I benefit immensely from being able to listen to books while on the go, from having those PDFs also on my phone so I can actually pull them up. Am I annotating them? Am I always able to do something with them the way that I'd like to? No, a lot of that stuff falls through the cracks, but I'm doing so much more, and I'm not really counting. I'm not really keeping track, but I'm pretty sure that when it all adds up, it's pretty epic, whatever it is, and I'm excited about it, and I feel great about it, and no, my attention span's not worse off for it. So it's like when people want to try to say that it's the phone causing that, it's like, the phone facilitates it and the phone exacerbates it, but also there are a series of hacks, mindsets, rules of thumb, practices that you can implement, and then also just being in love with certain things and being activated and actualized enough that I think that you're able to somewhat turn the tables on that situation. So, the question about other people, though, is probably the more important thing, which is just like the people that you surround yourself with. If you do too much associating with other people on the internet, the fact that it's like, it's sort of assumed that you're always on call for other people. And if you're not going to be that kind of person who's always on call for other people, then are you the kind of person who's just kind of always aloof? And if you're that kind of person who's always aloof, like, are you also just like blocking people randomly, or, leaving messages on read and then kind of ghosting for long periods of time? And that's where all of the relationship stuff gets really complicated and the internet gets really weird. And if you are easily led to a paranoid mindset, it just compounds in a negative way unless you do things to counter that paranoia. And there are things that you can do. So I'll just keep alluding to the fact that there are things that we can do, and say there's a variety of answers. And one of them was, and still is, the international tour that Theory Underground has been doing for the last 3 years. That's one important way of breaking through these weird walls. And it's not a total solution. It hasn't really solved anything, but I think it helps us keep grounded a little bit.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. I also, sorry, my baby is going crazy right now.
You got a baby going crazy.
I wanted to ask you about the role of the influencer online. And you were an influencer, a rare example of an influencer who blew up their own platform and left, voluntarily. Wasn't canceled, didn't have a psychic break necessarily. Just began to notice something that was going on. It's a weird incentive structure, right? Like you want to be able to do the thing. You want to be able to exit the normal workplace and do this other thing. Everyone wants to work with their mind, maybe not their hands. But your audience wanted something. You maybe wanted to give it to them because you wanted to be successful. But did you start to notice that you were internalizing the things that they wanted and you wanted to break away, basically? Like, did you find yourself confining, like basically, yeah, taking it in and not being able to think clearly about things. Is that why you left?
Yeah. The influencer thing is really interesting. Nowadays, it's popular to talk about audience capture. We didn't have that terminology when I quit, but I would have probably used that a little bit. You're right, I wasn't canceled leading up to my exodus and my, closing down the Patreon. Without getting too into it, I had been, years prior. In fact, before I even started the channel, it was just more of like a local activist kind of a thing. And I just learned the hard way how cowardly a lot of folks who were organizing in the activist space actually were. Because they would tell me, I think this is insane, but I'm also not going to be able to say anything because I don't want to draw any attention to me. And these people they have mental issues and we just have no way that we can actually, there's nothing we can do about it. Like that kind of stuff. And that was all, kind of in the peak of cancel culture, but prior to me starting in a platform. And part of the thing, starting it, doing online stuff, especially left influencership, I remember thinking oh, but what if I get canceled? I was like, I've already been canceled. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. I mean, they'll send emails to everybody that they can who's in my life and send them giant walls of text, but it's not that hard for me to have a conversation with that person if they want to talk about it. And at the end of the day, it's a great filter. It's honestly the greatest blessing in the world to have filtered from your life the people who are the most cowardly. If you were to just wake up one day and go, I'd really like to just separate myself from the people who live in constant fear of what other people might think or say, and who wouldn't really have my back if things came down to it. Well, good luck. You're not going to be able to do that. You can't just do that. You can't just do that. There's no way that you could just do that, right? But if you were going to get canceled, well, it does it for you. It's a great blessing. And so I'd already experienced that. I remember just being yeah, it made me closer in all of my relationships that I did have. And it made me better appreciate the ones that I did have. It helped me build better relationships going forward. And so, yeah, I wasn't afraid of that stuff at the time that I shut down my platform. This is, being years later. And of course, when I say shut down, it's just I stopped putting out regularly scheduled content. And I actually said goodbye to my patrons and closed down the Patreon, which was where I was getting money from at the time. And so the audience capture thing, though, yeah, I think you kind of already hit on it, but it's worth saying that I didn't feel like I could think things through, right? And I felt kind of bad because it's I don't hate leftists, obviously. I don't hate leftists. There's a tendency in left activist spaces that you either have to make your entire career about denouncing, and now you're going to be a dirtbag, or you spend your whole time sort of catering and capitulating to it. And as we saw with Lindsay Ellis, you can spend your whole life catering to and capitulating to these people, and they will still eat you alive. So, and for anyone who doesn't know about her, she's the most normie liberal, sort of video essayist creator, just a totally sweet person, but very sensitive and careful about the little feelings of all the people in her audience and everything like that. And they just tried to turn her into the worst person ever. And of course she wasn't, but they were dragging her. And I'm talking I don't know how many of them, but it always feels like it's way more than it actually is. But just like a whole bunch of people were making this concerted effort to ruin her life. And they're trying to make her out to be racist because she had said something about Asian art in passing when she was doing a video essay about the like Avatar, The Last Airbender or something like that. And it's just like the most, and she is so PC. She's so like DEI, like got to check all the boxes and pat all the heads for the whole like LGBTQIA plus, and so she like does all the stuff she's supposed to, and she's still getting just wrecked. And it's just like, yeah, man, like to me, it's like you either have to become like her, and then by the way, you're still not going to be safe, or you become like Chapo Trap House, and you be like, or Cumtown or whatever. You become like the dirtbag presence on the left, and it's like I didn't want to be either. Is the thing. It's like I don't want to have to be defined by that. That was a big part of it at the time. The other part, and the thing is I was definitely a dirtbag by the standards of the kinds of people I was associating with, and I hate being the person who is to the right of everybody I'm around when I know that in terms of everything, I am not to the left of them, but I'm like more grounded, realistic, and yet at the same time, there's a better path to getting to a better world, right? But as far as most people who call themselves left are concerned, they're going to think about that as being something that is monopolized by the left. If we want to talk about large-scale structural change for the most people, well, then that would mean left, right? Like that's what they think, and it's like, well, maybe I'm not necessarily convinced anymore. But where I was at was realizing like, so like these people aren't going to see me or hear me doing theory or having like any original ideas or really bringing anything unique to the conversation. It's always going to be sort of bracketed down into like this, oh, that's like the guy who's like kind of a dirtbag, but he's a little bit more conservative. I don't know, maybe a little crypto. And it's just like, no, I'm just a person actually. And I just really resent the fact that that's the way that it is for anybody who wants to get involved in any kind of a space that ostensibly wants to make a positive impact in the world. If you have like a masculine streak, I'm not saying like in a limited way, but I'm just saying like any sort of affect that is traditionally understood as masculine, like this is something you have to deal with. You either have to like perform soft boy shit, or you have to like make your identity about being that guy. And the cringiest example of that would probably be Vosh. Vosh is like an example of someone who performs being that guy. It's like the masculine leftist. And of course, Hassan would be another version of like the rich boy masculine leftist. And it's like, I didn't want to have to do that. I felt like that was a form of capture, this having to make an identity out of that thing. And it's like, yeah, I do get aggressive or animated. Here's the thing, I always get animated, but I can also get aggressive. This streaming space that I was in was one that sort of wanted me to be more aggro more often than I want to be. And ultimately I was all of that for what? So you can have an argument about like what slurs should be allowed or if slurs should be allowed or who you have to constantly talk about centering or whatever. When in reality, I care about like what is power, what is capital, what is alienation, what is the good life, like what are ethics, what are things that we can do here and now, but also like what's a more realistic way of getting forward, and what are ways of organizing and thinking and acting that can fundamentally undermine the deadlock currently imposed by, in Waypoint, I'm going to call it psychological gerrymandering, but now talk about it as the gerrymandering of attunements, the gerrymandering of Befindlichkeit, or another way is just talking about the duopoly and how everything gets captured within that. And now there's no possibility of thinking outside of it. We got all these people going to Minneapolis, all of this like, oh my gosh, like, marching on the streets, like, we're going to have a civil war. Hey, get your gun. Come on down. Everyone, come. We have to stop ICE. And it's just like, it's like seeing the 2020 thing all over again. It's like the George Floyd protests. It's just like, you guys, like, this is not a way. It's not any real way forward at all. In fact, what it really does is it'll have its little moment, and then the repressive apparatuses will be 3 times stronger. Every time they will be so much stronger. If they do a little like token like correction and extra training for ICE officers, then people will feel like so accomplished or whatever. And it's like you're not going to get whatever it is that you want from this. And just my little side note on this, the worst part about it is that they're encouraging people to put themselves in harm's way and antagonize people who are going to potentially shoot them, right? Like this is like encouraging people to go rile up bears because we're mad that bears keep attacking people. It's just like, okay, well, stay away from the bears then. Like, what are you doing? And so
yeah, I mean they're congregating with phones, right? And those phones we all know are tracked. So it's kind of it's difficult because obviously we go to crowds because we want to feel the ecstasy of the press of all the bodies and of feeling like we're part of a throng of an actual people, the people, That's why we show up to these crowds. And yet when they disperse, we go home, and we have to go home. We have jobs, we have landlords, we have bosses. One of the things that you discuss in Waypoint is this sort of lack of motivation that comes from the fact that your boss, your landlord, or your mortgage lender are conspiring with the threat of homelessness. Kind of, I'm maybe putting some words in your mouth, but you basically kind of say this to keep you to go to work, and the teacher sets down his red pen that he's marking your report card with and shakes hands with parents, right, who police the home, and admission staff of higher education who decide your fate. And then online, we're all mutually surveilling one another and being surveilled all the time. Between these like 3 paradigms, it's like we cannot find the motivation to do things for ourselves often, if we're just conditioned under that. But then also, where are the people? What happens the day after the revolution? This is one of the reasons I read Jody Dean, for instance, somebody who deals with this concept well, I think. But yeah, I just think these things are rather unfortunate, only insofar as I think we all want May of '68, but we want it to work. We want, we want 2/3 of the workforce out in the streets and shutting the whole society down, and we want the students and the unions and the party, and we want to make the politicians bow. And it's not working, unfortunately, yet. Not to say that this won't, I'm not a prophet, but I just mean that the downside, obviously, is that people only have so much energy to commit to these things. And when these sorts of interventions fail, we do deal with a depression, which is, in my opinion, the recognition that we don't see our political values then. We don't see them registered in the places that we want, like on TV or whatever. It doesn't work, right, in the end. We have to have a sober reckoning, and so there is a downside to those sorts of things, which, as much as I am very sympathetic to them, and no one can stand up and say who the left is and what the left should do. So that's a really unfortunate situation that we're stuck in, which is why I really like your method of giving yourself time. Giving
right,
yourself
that's
time
a good
to think about these
segue.
things.
Right, that's a good segue. That was part of the big issue, was just like this feeling of like the movement is more or less supposed to be a thing, and you agree with it, and you more or less stay within the parameters of what's expected to be able to be a part of it. And I was like looking around, and I was like, this is not going anywhere. People were all saying like, oh yeah, the George Floyd the protest, this is going to be the end of capitalist American imperialism. Like, this is the beginning that we're going to. And I was like, if that's true, this is going to be just really bad, really. Like what you're talking about, a civilization will just crumble away and then just fade into darkness is essentially what you're saying. Like there would be nothing to replace it, right? Like this would just be worse. Whatever you're asking for would just be worse. And so you couldn't really talk about it. You couldn't really think about it. You couldn't really do anything about it. You're just supposed to be sort of just looking at whatever the currently trending thing is and giving some character to whatever the left is supposed to be saying about that thing. That is what the influencer position is, puts a personality on basically saying the thing that we're expected to say. There's a sort of spectrum of acceptable opinions that you can have on any given thing with it still being considered left, and put your own personality on it, develop your own brand of being the kind of person who says certain kinds of things about the certain kinds of things that become trending. And it was like, okay, well, I would rather be thinking. And more importantly, I was, as I'm burning on the left and I'm looking around, I'm like, well, where do I go? Like, what do I read? What do I study? So I'm listening to What's Left podcast, and I'm looking into Platypus Affiliated Society and The Left is Dead, Long Live the Left. So that's a good place to start with Platypus, or with What's Left. It was at this point, long after Benjamin Studebaker had left. This is Amy Therese, and she's post-left still. This is before she goes completely anti-left. This is before she goes like super Trump. This is like while she's like in this period of just like having on a lot of guests and picking their brains. And I'm like listening to What's Left podcast and looking into Platypus stuff, and I'm like, well, this is all cool, but like on the one side, Platypus is too Marxist in this sort of orthodox sense, kind of by my standards. Whereas on the other side, it's like What's Left is too socialite. It's like Red Scare or any of these other podcasts. It's like we're talking about socialites. Like these are people. This is why people always say, dime square leftists. Like what they're talking about is a certain kind of hipster who hangs out in New York City. And, it's cool that some of them have slightly more populist sort of leanings now. It's cool that some of them don't think that the professional managerial class should be so elitist or whatever. Cool, great. And what I don't like about socialites is that what socialites always do is like they always kind of just, they click up, and then it's always just kind of assumed like we're the cool kids because we get it. And we get it because we're the cool kids. It's a circular argument that's never actually argued. It's just a certain demeanor that imposes we're cool because we get it, and we get it because we're cool. And it's just like, but what do you get? Like you're over all that, you're post that, and what does it mean to be post that? Does that mean you've sublated it? Does it mean that you're over it? You're after it? In what ways? And it's just never very well defined. And it is just like this cliquish insinuation. And so I didn't like the post-left podcast scene very much. And I was like, there should be a place for people who care about like intellectual integrity and moral integrity and actually understanding things and doing the kind of research that you should probably be doing or having an opportunity to do when in college, right? Like an actual opportunity to read books and have conversations about those with other people who genuinely care, which is currently not something that you can really get through your average college, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what are they, I love that there's that void or black hole in the center of, well, we're not this and we're not that, and we hate this and we hate that. Like, when do we get to the project of construction, right? Because if it's the negation of the negation, we have to at some point, and by that, of course, I mean, it's very easy for us to say what we don't like. It is much harder to summon the courage that would come from having to put yourself in the subject position of the one who is going to create a new society, right? Which is a grandiose thing to suggest, but presumably that is the call of the left, that's their self-appointed job.
Right.
So yeah, it's very frustrating. And where's the space to genuinely ask questions, right? Because you always, about the rightoid provocateur who's quote unquote just asking questions, in a manner that's supposed to that is in a bad faith arguing against the thing that they're talking about. But really, genuinely, I mean, where are the truth seekers? Where are the people who are actually... I mean, the work of learning these things takes a long time. It takes a lot of reflection. It takes a lot of conversations and a lot of experimentation and bravery, I think. And as you've discussed, the radical responsibility that comes with assigning oneself the role of being someone who will... There you go.
I was just writing it down. Yeah.
Who will be the one who's going to decide what's going to happen? Yeah, you tell them about what you think about radical responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's kind of developing to be a little bit more complicated than it was initially. The initial way was just to say that the side of the political duopoly that takes on the highest aspirations and, drives for the greatest change that would impact the most people has a greater responsibility that I call the radical responsibility, the responsibility incumbent on radicals for the way that you will be perceived, interpreted, and the way that your sloganeering and your action, your organization, your party program, whatever it is, the way that is going to result in inevitable and predictable reaction. And so it's like to say that the left is responsible for the right's reaction. Look, I agree the same way the other way around. I do believe that the cartoonishly ridiculous left that we currently see is actually kind of the fault of the right. Like I could say that, but I hold the left more responsible on the basis of this argument about radical responsibility, right? And so to say that both sides are responsible for the other side is to say you are responsible for the enemy that you create. You're in this way. If you're constantly holding up a stereotype and you're saying this group is this thing that is so stupid and evil, and then that other side says, you're right, we are stupid and evil, and then it acts stupid and evil, it's like, yeah, but you're the one who was like holding up that and saying this is who you guys are, right? So both sides are doing this constantly to the other side. The duopolistic hate Inc. era of extremism that we see is like we're both sides of the media are constantly like cherry picking worse things about the other side and then stitching that into a conspiracy theory of like, see, but this is who they really are. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot of people in this country. I'm not sure if anybody's aware of how many people there are, but there's a lot. It's way more than we're even capable of thinking about. And the people that you see represented through the media are not ever really representative of the actual people in the country. Nothing close. So there's good liberals and there's good conservatives and there's good leftists and there's good, I would even say rightists, traditionalists. I mean, like think of like Amish people. How many people actually have problems with Amish people? When's the last time you had a problem with a Mennonite? Like no one has any problems with these people. How many people really have problems with the Mormon church except for like, the occasional person who leaves inevitably to return 10 years later. So it's like, I think there's we really underestimate the degree to which like even the weirdest people in this country aren't that bad. But the media still finds a way to weave together this boogeyman of the other side. Mm-hmm. But then there's the people who go and like they get involved in local organizing for the left or the right, where in order to do the thing, they either have to accept that identity or constantly resist it. And then you inevitably have people who are just like, yeah, that's right, I am the Nazi, or yeah, that's right, I am the communist. And they kind of take on the thing that they're being called by the other side. And then they actually try to like, and you see, this is correct. This is correct, actually. And whether that's their enjoyment or, as it clearly is with Fuentes, or if they actually mean it, or, hey, it could be like it's the coalescence of both meaning it and enjoying it, right? Who knows? Mm-hmm.
this ultimately boils down to, though, both sides are responsible for their opposition. And it's like, I think that the only real path forward is to become more critical of the side that you more or less fall onto, and to say, we have to stop doing this. We're creating an enemy that will probably defeat us. At least when we're talking about the left, especially, it's like, well, it's going to win. It's going to win every time, guys, because it's the side that is like more pro-gun. You know, it's the side that has force on it. It's like it's the side where like might makes right still actually means something, right? Like their whole idea of like small government but big military, big cop, big border. Like the idea is like, yeah, well, government is inherently bad, therefore limit it to the only things that are absolutely necessary. And so they embrace that. They embrace the dark side in a sort of sense. The left like disavows it and then always wants to pull it back in last second. Oh, actually, grab your gun. Let's go fight ICE. A little late for that. It's not going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the antidote has got to be something about making your enemy's argument better than they're making it effectively. You know, not having enemies effectively, which is unfortunate because I think what animates the left is a feeling like we're the good guys. And I sympathize with this. But on the other hand, you know, yeah, we have to kind of, what is the phrase, to steel man one's opponent's argument and really try to say, is this what you mean? Because obviously there is a rational kernel of truth, right? This is a phrase that exists for a reason. And that doesn't mean we tarry with every fully denigrated idea. I feel like there are a list of them. One of them would be maybe eugenics. One of them might be, you know, ethnic nationalism or whatever. But on the other hand, obviously, people have urges towards these things because they're, you know, it's a misdirected sort of desire that they're pursuing, and they want a better society. I mean, a lot of people forget. Not that I want to give them any credit, but the Nazis' project was to improve mankind, although they did it in the most disgusting way possible, which I fully disavow. But it's one of those things where it's like we can't exactly call Trumpism Nazism because it's not the same. There is no focus on the betterment of humanity. It's literally just I'm getting mine. It's racketeering. It's criminal enterprise. And they like that too, obviously. Like his supporters like that. They imagine themselves as being inside the benefits of that. Okay, whatever. But I think the point is that, the paranoid framework, right, is what constructs these myths of our opponents. And we, in the paranoid framework, is allowed to like gather evidence, but doesn't have to get a whole grasp on what are they really saying. What are they trying to say? How can we broker an understanding between these two parties, which is the very role of politics in this? And I admit there is nowhere to do that.
Right.
Habermas might have wanted rational communication, but where can that take place? At least where I live,
right.
There's no public land, and the places that might have been the public square are privatized and they don't exist anymore. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the idea. Part of the idea of the dredge and the agora with the tour, you know, it's the idea of, you know, you meet a bunch of people on the internet and then you go meet them in real life and you do events and you meet more people and you keep going back and forth between internet and different people's locales, but then you don't just like meet in secret in these locales or do auditorium meetups or whatever, but it's like, no, you actually weave the hybrid experience into those locales. And you do this with what I'm calling the agora, which is, you know, a sort of cyber, you know, innovation. It's the idea of like a live streamed event that is also happening somewhere open to like people walking by. So it's like we have random people passing by on the internet and random people passing by on the street, and we're learning how to talk to each other in the presence of that kind of sort of audience in flux that drops in and drops out. And loops in through the QR code that brings them to the video version that's online. And we were experimenting with this a little bit, and it gets really crazy because it turns out not everybody wants to have all their conversations be on the internet. And also a lot of people like to have this sort of secret conversations, and then they turn around and say things totally different on the internet. And it was like this whiplash for me. And it's I might need to just embrace it. Still thinking about that. Maybe it just needs it. I need to maybe respect the esoteric, exoteric, inside, outside sort of division. But also, I just feel like it's people who call themselves pragmatic, and they're thinking all about how their message is going to reach people this way, and they cultivate and curate it to this people, and then those people, and try to meet people where they're at. I also just like, well, isn't that convenient to your career trajectory? Isn't that convenient to never really just saying what you think?
Yeah, if you're keeping one set of books, out of view, and you're doing this other thing, is that not duplicitous? I mean, is it not like why we don't like Straussians, for instance? To have this sort of secondary motive, knowing better than, and doing the work of the censor for them. It's tough because obviously
I like Straussians. I don't trust them though.
yeah. Okay. Good clarification. Yeah. Well, one of the last things that I wanted to get to, I know we've gone fairly long. I appreciate your time, Dave. The new thing that we're working on is Canon TCG, and I just want to know. Okay, so for those people who don't know, give us the elevator pitch real quick, and then I have a few follow-up questions. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So. Canon, the liberal arts trading card game, it's not actually been revealed in some sort of a public with fanfare way on the channel, but anybody who's been attentive and keeping up with everything or randomly dropped in at the right moment might know already that this is a thing that I've been working on. It was what I was referring to throughout the latter half of 2025 as the super secret project for the new era. If I said the whole thing, otherwise it was just the secret project. It was something I was working on a lot. And so while doing Theory Underground and all this stuff I normally do with it, I was also working on this card game. And maybe that's a little kind of crazy, but like for me, this is not any old card game. This card game is not just for people who play a lot of games. It's expected to actually be something that a lot of people who don't normally play games are going to want to play. So I'm not thinking about we think of, dual income, no kids kinds of couples who play a lot of games over to their local tabletop game store, or they have a lot of Dungeons and Dragon nights at their house and they dye their hair and they're really cute and they're fun couples. And that's great. That's not who I'm talking about. Those people, though, will probably love this game. They're probably going to love playing it with other people who don't fit into their niche. That's the goal of the game, is to be respectable by people who are lifestyle gamers, but at the same time, accessible, addicting, and just something you might really want to get into, even if you're not a gamer, right? And so, yeah, that's the goal here, is that this game is going to get people into at least this game, not necessarily into games. I don't really care about games. I care about this game. So what's special about this game? Well, this is really a way to raise up general liberal arts canon literacy, which is something that I care about for me. It's something I care about for my loved ones. It's something I care about for my future children. It's something, obviously, that we need in this world. And maybe if that's not obvious, further proof that it's needed, because it is needed. You can't get anything out of philosophy or theory if you don't have some general canon literacy, first of all. So, speaking to our own niche, people who are really into philosophy and theory, you probably don't even know how much you have in terms of that general canon literacy. Or if you do, chances are you don't really realize how little you have. That'd be the other side of it, right? The fact is you either need it or you really need it, right? And so canon literacy, general canon literacy, I think it's been lost, and it's been lost everywhere. It's been lost especially at these places where they all read great classic literature. You know, if you're going to some private school and you all read great classic literature. Well, yeah, but this is a fetish of really what we're getting at when we talk about the canon, right? For me, what I'm getting at with canon is a sort of civilization-wide argument about what is canon. And it's not something that you really get in a culture of fracture, in the post-class fractured mass, where everybody's canon is really just their own little fandom or set of things that they're into, where I might go, well, for my house, Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones, that's canon. And someone else goes, oh yeah, well, you know, Glee is canon. You know, and this is where you get into like, well, is Harry Potter canon? No, I'm talking about the written word, and I'm talking about mathematicians, scientists, historians, philosophers, and great literary epic poets and the writers of tragedies and comedies and whatnot. And so really what we're talking about are those kinds of cultural products, if you want to call them that. I kind of don't like that, but we'll go with it, that can only be produced from a space of skole, which is to say, the thing that time energy gets qualified as when there are other people doing all the work, right? So other people do all the work so that you are able to, as long as you have a good pedigree and tutors and enough of an interest in these things and exposure to these things at the right time and the requisite amount of talent, you're able to actually like unlock these things, right? And if you're able to unlock these things, well, doing them is the unlocking of them, right? So it's like for people like Adorno, or let's go further back to some great Renaissance or polymath kind of person like Bacon or Descartes or something like that. You're never just studying it. Studying it is doing it, right? Like this is why if you look at the stuff that they were doing, like they were doing a bit of everything. It's like, you know, you don't expect that Galileo's doing alchemy, right? And it's like, no, he's doing alchemy too. Well, it's because if there's something cool that everybody's into and it's supposed to be a knowledge field and you have any interest in it, you do it in an attempt to understand it. And so if you're actively like living in this space of skole, which is to say active leisure, if you're inhabiting that kind of a space, then yeah, you taking up any of these things, any of these objects of study, or any of these subject matters means doing it. And so it's not you don't just study math so you can get a diploma that said that you did math. No, like you actually like learn theorems so that you can develop theorems and you can constantly apply yourself to problems that have not yet been solved. So it's like doing math would not just mean that you learn this is what all the great mathematicians figured out. No, like you're finding real problems that are unsolved and then you're trying yourself on those. And the same sort of thing goes to, what did it mean to be a naturalist? It meant that you were collecting specimens. So it's like you go into Thomas Jefferson's, his special room or whatever. It's like all the little animals that he's caught and he's preserved, and all the leaves and the seeds, and then he sends these to his friends in other countries, and then they send them theirs, and it's like Pokemon, what they were doing as naturalists back then. They're trying to identify and in a sort of encyclopedic way actually like get a hold of like what is reality here. And so that, you know, the naturalist side of it is like, what is reality in terms of nature? But then you take that out and you go, okay, but also like, what do we know in terms of great literature about what it means to be human? What do we know in terms of great philosophy, in terms of what it is to be human? How does that apply to theology? What questions from philosophy or literature is theology trying to answer at any given time? It never just comes out of the void and tries to say something. Theology is always responding to people's heartfelt problems, and those problems are usually posed in either verse, you know, literature, or, you know, actual arguments in philosophy. And so this is what we lack. You know, it's not just a bunch of ideas and equations and discoveries and concepts or whatever. No, what we actually lack is access to the voices of our ancestors. What we lack in terms of this general canon literacy is the ability and freedom to be a part of a much bigger conversation that spans thousands of years, where the people who sacrifice their whole lives to really think something through are able to commune with us, thanks to the people who sacrifice their lives to keep that voice alive. Because when we say something like Paul the Apostle or Plato, you're naming not just a person, you're naming something that has been delivered over to us by thousands of years. I think thousands of years kind of like undermines it, actually. You have to say, within 1,000 years, how many people had to live generation to generation to carry that person's voice forward? Okay. And it's important to point out, they wouldn't just do that by rote. They're not just doing that because of tradition. A lot of things can happen in 1,000 years. To actually have someone withstand the test of those time is incredible. That means that person, using Plato or Shakespeare, that person's voice was able to speak to so many people along the way. And all those people are coming from different personalities and moods and cultural contexts. They're living through wars and famines and moving and this and that. And they bring that forward to us. Like, that's absolutely incredible. And I understand like the sort of Foucauldian critique here, which would be like, okay, well, who's writing history? It's the victors. And, who wanted us to see these people, these people serve power. It's limited. It's worth thinking about that, but that's also limited because also these people are usually the origin of all kinds of ways that things have been challenged, right? And then of course they get co-opted in the ways that they do. But that's why they have a claim on us. They have a claim on us, whether we want to, accept that gift or not, whether we want to actually inspect it, whether we want to actually open it up and see what's inside there. We still live in their world. The question is do we actually have any freedom within our world by getting some critical distance from what's been given? And for most of us, because we're functionally illiterate and we never actually get to read anything, especially not twice or 3 times, we don't even realize how much we're sort of echoes in these guys' heads. And, our best ideas at the best points in our life are like these sad diminutions of things that they thought, Mm-hmm. So
yeah,
that's what I want to raise general canon literacy for. And the whole thing about this game is that I think it's going to make that easy and fun in a lot of different ways. So yeah, there's more that I'll say about it, but I want to see what you'll say.
Yeah, that's great. I think you've answered a lot of my potential questions. I mean, a lot of people might want to, this happens in music a lot too. People will think, oh, there's all these great bands out there. The problem is they've never been discovered. No, the problem is that they're not very good. Right? I mean, that's not true, obviously, of maybe third world literature that was like suppressed, or we're talking about book bannings, or we're talking about women who weren't allowed to write. But okay, yes, there are historical reasons why certain figures don't, or people who otherwise might have made it to the canon would. But you can kind of enter like a superposition there with this, where it's like, I'm not making a judgment claim necessarily that these are the best. What I am saying is that these canonical authors are ones who have shaped and create this world that we have, and they have provided nourishment mentally, spiritually for people for often hundreds of years, thousands sometimes. So I guess you can get into a sticky wicket there, though, when for instance, you think Harry Potter will be very significant somehow, right? Because of how popular it is. Who knows? Does that mean that J.K. Rowling is a canonical author? Harold Bloom would not say so. So right. I wonder what you would think about that, the difference between popularity, because obviously there's something called a period piece that is something that just, yes, it was widely popular. It thought, you thought it would go the distance, and it was widely sold, and then it ended up in the dustbin of history. So what would you say about this, I guess the difficulty with the popular author versus the canonical one versus the suppressed the suppressed, never heard author. I think you kind of spoke on that, but I'm just wondering. It sounds like though that the game is supposed to be the field in which one is going to mete that out, right? Like most of these authors, whether even if they're even fringe canonical, will be in there, and you'll be able to basically say this author's in my deck because I stand on this. I stand this author, if you will.
Yep.
I'm a fan of this, and I'm going to fight for it.
Right. Well, yeah, it's for a person to make a serious argument about what it has canonicity, they would have to have a point of comparison in terms of staying power. So if you haven't read Dante and Shakespeare, you can't really argue that Gabriel Garcia is on their level, right? Let's be fair. I've read Gabriel Garcia more than I've read Dante or Shakespeare. Harold Bloom would slap me. Harold Bloom would say that Gabriel Garcia, Marquez, sorry, I keep calling him Gabriel Garcia. His last name is Marquez. What am I even thinking? But that's what you really know. You know that you're dealing with like someone who's made it when you only use their last name. So it's funny that I Freudian like slipped his last name and only was calling him by his first and second. Anyway, point being, I've read more Marquez than I have Dante or Shakespeare. So I can't really actually say like what's what. Like the whole point is like if you want to make a contribution to the civilization-wide conversation about who's got canonicity because they have this kind of staying power, there's certain things that are lacking to be able to say that it's J.K. Rowling, right? And a couple of those criteria would be, one, the passage of time hasn't actually occurred. Like she's still alive. If you want to hedge your bets and like stake your life on her being there in 1,000 years, that's great. And maybe you'll even be able to like help contribute to making that possible. That's what this is all about. You stake your, 100%. Try. I think that your efforts are probably going to be wasted though if you're not capable of engaging in that argument in a sophisticated and actually effort-based way, which is to say like you've actually done the work of having tarried with the other contestants, right? So it's like you're going to be a judge on the stage of history, but you haven't given any of the contestants time except for the one that got you when you were 14 years old. Come on. Yeah.
Absolutely, and the critics of the canon will say that's the trap of the canon, right? Like, that's their game. They just make you read. They say, well, you have to read Dante, and you also have to read Chaucer, and then you can talk to me. And it's like, I get it. I mean, I understand that as an impulse, but we also do live at times when there is the cult of the new. Everyone we want to make something new, right? We want to slough off the weight of history. But I think you and I are probably simpatico on that while we might be sympathetic, we want to be creators, it's not actually possible to do what it is that you're suggesting, right? We can't just ignore them. And they're still there. And if you want to become great, you're going to have to read many of these people, right? Like if you're going to want to do that new thing, you got to read. I'm a big fan of that.
And let's think about what Samuel said the other day at the end of lecture 1 in the philosophy of religion, which was just yesterday? Was that yesterday? Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
I asked him the question about Tolkien. And, because as far as like the enchanted world like goes, like he's the guy. The Inklings were profoundly impacted by G.K. Chesterton, who was like, I believe in fairies. I believe in the fairy world. And really his whole life, Chesterton is like this very witty defense of wonder. And Tolkien kind of takes that and he really runs with it, right? And so Samuel's like saying, he's the Virgil of our age, that time will show that he's the Virgil of our age. Well, if somebody says that and they haven't spent their life in books and actually like associating with all kinds of different people from all kinds of different places, then that doesn't count for as much. But when Samuel says it, it's like that counts for a lot, because first of all, he's read Virgil. You could be sure he's read all of these different people, and so when he says it, it's like that counts for something. It's not just the person who got into fantasy because of youth fiction,
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of when we were referring to Harry Potter was, well, I guess that's just a poor shade of Tolkien, isn't it? Yeah. And so I kind of want to ask you, because I know you have been influenced by Marx, and surely you've thought a lot about the various forms of capture, obviously, as you're writing something new on that, that you seem to have harnessed the power of the commodity in a way with Canon TCG, but you seem to be doing it in a way that you wish to be calculated about. That is to say, you're selling people a nice frame. Maybe you'll even do hollow cards. Who knows whether they'll be, foils or whatever. But
there will be. Yeah.
Okay, cool. But the point is, the thing on the inside is not some fantasy game that you created and stamped your IP on. It's almost the public domain in many cases, or at least these are not yours. I mean, in the case of Living Thinkers, you have to give permission or whatever. But in any case, yeah, like Virgil on a card, you're not bothering Virgil's descendants to ask them. And the point is that you're drawing attention to the names in the frame. Did you think about that as you were creating it, or did you kind of like lean into the like accelerationist tendency of like harnessing what works? That is to say, people love collecting. They love to complete a set. Was that on your mind when you developed the game?
Yeah.
Or was it just
100%.
sort of a byproduct of like Magic, being akin to the way? I mean, you can't get away from it, right? It's a trading card game, kind of, but
right.
Obviously, you'll have to decide how to sell things. Like in terms of Magic has a highly exploitative standard game mode, if you will, to those of you who might have played Magic the Gathering, where they're constantly changing the cards and you have to buy a lot of cards, and it's just very expensive. Be very expensive.
Right. Well, thank God I'm a post-Marxist, first of all, so I don't have any real guilt here when it comes to trying to harness the commodity form. But also, Marx invested on the stock market, with Daddy Engels' money, and so it's like, it's one of those things where I think maybe there was like this part of me that was like, oh, I'll never have a business, when I was younger, and I just see that version of myself, and maybe this is very cool, convenient now or whatever it could be, but I see that as like a less mature understanding of capital and the commodity. It's like actually like the way that you scroll is a commodity. Like everything about your life is a commodity. You can't get outside of it. You can have your whole life just be a consumer, or you can be a producer consumer, Now, of course, everybody, insofar as you work or whatever, there's also production there, and there's also production in terms of like they're harvesting data from your scrolling and from your shopping habits and what. So we could always kind of say everyone's everything all the time. But I think that when it comes to this game, what it does is like you said, harnesses the commodity without, I think, giving into its worst elements, which is to say, it's not going to actually read the books for you. It's not going to actually give you this primary access to the voices of these great historical figures in your council. However, it will on-ramp you to them. And it's like if the whole game was just like you get instruments and then you try to like organize your time energy so that you can like play these instruments, so that you can like, play songs or whatever. It's like doing that would make you want to practice an instrument. It would not just make you want to collect CDs and records that you then listen to. The point here is cultivating a desire to do something that can't just be done with the requisite amount of money. No, you instead actually need to free up your time and energy from labor power and then actually achieve a state of skole in order to do the thing that you now desire. It's cultivating a desire that cannot be met within capitalism. It actually cultivates a desire. Well, okay, some people could do it within capitalism. You couldn't have a general uplift of like the entire population's canon literacy and the liberating arts without that leading to a supreme dissatisfaction with the way that things actually are. That's necessarily cooked into it. And I'll just say this, I've had some amazing reports from people who played the game, so shouting out, for instance, Bethany, Matthew Stanley's wife, she said that, she's a busy mom and she doesn't ever have time to play games, but she can totally see herself wanting to play this game a lot more. Because she had fun with it, but more importantly, it made her want to read a lot of the books they already have on their library shelves. It just made her want to. And then one really cool message that I'll read out today, shout out to Ezra. He said, there's something about that mechanism. He's referring to the mechanism where you have to reread a text. He said, actually, I'll just read it. I'll read it here. He said, I started reading capitalist realism since playing Canon, and I'm feeling the aspect of it that makes it so you only get half points for reading a text once. I feel like I'm only absorbing about 40% of it. Haha. I really like that mechanism of the game. The thing is like in the game, the first time you read a text, it's worth half its stated value. The second time it's worth its stated value. The third time it's worth double its stated value. And that's the main way that the points in this game actually work. Then he goes, there's something about that mechanism that almost prepped me to reframe my approach to reading it. Like it built in some grace for my comprehension or lack of, and subtly made me more ready / willing to read it a second time. Your game is truly brilliant. Okay, this is the kind of feedback I'm getting, and that that's just an old friend from the music scene. You know what I mean? Like I love him dearly, but it's like he's the kind of person this game is for. Is not for the person who plays a lot of tabletop games, and also not for the person who's already like a liberal arts reading aficionado or like theory dork or whatever. Like the point, like us. The point is not like people like us. The point is people who are our friends, who are our acquaintances, people who are, somewhat into some aspect of the thing. And then also those people who are like, maybe the only thing that we really have in common is like, yeah, we want to read. They want to read Shakespeare. I want to read Heidegger. But like, hey, by playing this game, there's a new frame for us to kind of understand how the things that we're into, these niches of the post-class fractured mass that are colored in this sort of liberal arts, veneer, like it's part of the same world, And then so like the last thing I'll say about the commodity form, I mean, anybody can make a bunch of cards that are essentially flashcards for figures from the canon, because that is public domain. That would be the baseball cardification of the liberal arts canon, which is what I always was against. There was always this part of me that was like, well, I kind of just want it for my own sake. It would almost just be like having cool, like flashcards from college, like flashcards with real art that are used to sort of map out the timeline for me. And I've always wanted to have that, but I wasn't going to actually push the button and proceed if all it was the baseball cardification, like the pure collector's thing. The collectors ruin everything is what, that's what Richard Garfield, the founder inventor of magic, says. He says the collectors ruin everything. And of course, when you think about Pokemon scalpers, Like people who go and they just buy up all the cards, they ruin everything. And it's like, well, the drive for capital and people just trying to make a living. And, I guess that's, someone's got to be the person who does the thing that capital wants them to do, which is, rent out a storage unit and fill it with all of the cards that you were able to buy from like every city in your vicinity because you've just filled your truck up with these Pokemon cards. And now you're able to sell them for 10 times what they were valued at. Yeah, I guess so. That's an interesting problem. It's not something I imagine we're going to run into for a few reasons. We're not a publicly traded company. It's not going to be, it's not a startup in that sense where it's just like, I'm going to build up this thing and make it a great IP and then sell it. It's like, no, this is my framework for my next phase of personal education as well as for my children's education. Like I'm thinking about this the way that Hegel and Wittgenstein went and taught children at midpoints in their careers. Not to really compare myself to them, but I think we should always have aspirational models. And the model of them actually going and teaching children and making something of that. Like, what did Wittgenstein do? He wrote a dictionary while teaching children. And what did Hegel do? I mean, this is when he's really developing this stuff that goes into the encyclopedia. So of course, he's not just an encyclopedia guy, right? He does the philosophy of spirit after that high school experience. And it's like, or maybe during, but then it's like the science of logic after. I got to get that straight. But anyway, point being, the aspirational model here for me is of going back to basics and not just in your area of specialization. Like for me, it's like, I do want to go deeper into all the things that I've specialized in, but I also want to step back and sort of have like this broader view. And I don't want that to be an isolating experience. I want it to be something that's fun and brings other people in with me. And especially those kinds of people like Ezra, who, it's like otherwise it's like we connect and we talk about the old times, about the music scene, and it's just the same old, right? This is like a new frame where it's not just like, oh, Dave went to college, he's going to tell me about a book he likes. No, this is different because it actually conveys some of my deepest theses about pedagogy without me actually having to put them to words. It's just there,
I love it. I think it's going to be very popular. I wish you all the luck, and I hope that it is a success. I am really grateful that we've had this time. I guess I want to close out with just one broad question, and this is a selfish question that I have. What advice?
That's totally fine, man. You gotta get at least one selfish question.
I gotta get my question in. What advice would you give to an autodidact that you don't always know what you don't know? You don't know, you don't know where you've not gone. You might get stuck trying to flesh out one particular area of your map with a lot of detail. Obviously, the game Canon TCG is going to be really big for this. But what advice would you give to somebody who doesn't really even know what they don't know? How do you find a place? How do you find a vantage where you can see what all you need to be paying attention to that you're not? And how does an autodidact instill in themselves a discipline that they might otherwise have received in the academy or towards a purpose, maybe of writing a book or whatever it is that, maybe if you're not a published author yet?
Yeah. It really, because I don't think about autodidacts as all being like the same. In fact, I feel like autodidacts are more different one to the next than the professional academic. At the level of the form of the schooling system, the professional academic had to be a box checking, hoop jumping, red tape cutting, bureaucratic acrobatics kind of guy or gal. And the autodidact, all I really know about that person is they probably didn't fit in those boxes. They didn't really fit. And so, it's like they were trying to jump through those hoops and they tripped, and they tripped maybe too many times. They lost some teeth. They look beat up from the street up, but they won't stop and they just keep going. And then I think, well, that's not really the case. There's a lot of them who they missed their window to go to college because they were taking care of somebody or doing something like that. So you get into all kinds of ways that it's different. And then of course, with the professional academic, it's almost guaranteed that person went from high school to college. That it was like maybe there was a year or two in between, tops. Probably not though. And so it's like their life has pretty much been this institutionalized life. The autodidact, though, is like it's very hard to know at what point they even on-ramped into these things. And so to give generalizable advice seems extremely hard. And so I would like to do that anyway, but I want to start with what's concrete, immediate, and you. You're here in the room with us, and so I know that you're, as the narrator of Waypoint, there's always and you wrote a little thing at the beginning. It's like a little forward of sorts. With that came the question of like, well, how much do you actually bring yourself into it? And the answer is like, well, in that kind of thing, like it's insinuated and maybe you humanize yourself just enough that people know you're a person, because especially as a Deleuzian, you have some making up to do, right? But no, I actually want to interpolate you though as like the autodidacts and say something even a couple minutes long about, do you feel stuck? Do you feel like that is the current situation for you? Or did you, and now you don't? And if not, then what changed? And what have you personally found useful in this sense?
Yeah, good. Throwing it right back at me. Yeah, I guess it is tough to know. I think we can latch on to thinkers because it's something we were missing, and somehow we read it and we think, oh my God, how did they manage to say that thing? They put words to this thought that I've already had, and isn't that brilliant that I had this thought and someone else said it way better than I could. And so those thinkers I always gravitated towards. But of course, I lack a solid foundation that maybe somebody like your Benjamin Studebaker might have had, or somebody who got to go to Oxford or whatever. And so, kind of get out of your depth. You can fall in love with a thinker, and then you don't even realize you realize you don't even understand them half the time. You just like your reading of them. And so this can be really paralyzing for me. This sort of like almost like fear of misapprehension or misuse of a thinker. But I do think I'm getting better. My life is getting very busy though. Being a parent, and now I'm about to be a parent of two. So the time that I have is even less. I have even less time, and even more. My motivation is just through the roof to read. Every split second I get, I'm trying to get some more information and put more pieces together. But yeah, I guess it's just so hard to know what I don't know. Like, for instance, until we met, I didn't understand that I loved Adorno because Adorno was opposite Lenin. When I first started reading Adorno, I thought, my God, this is the voice of reason, the countervailing voice of reason that people who want to rush out and make a change need to be reading right now. So yeah, I guess I feel fairly confident that I'm on the right track now that I'm in Theory Underground. But on the other hand, I worry about all those people who are just out there just marching along, totally cut off from any resources and not knowing where to go or what to read. Or honestly, that question can be better formulated as who to trust or who to not waste your time reading. I think there's a lot of people think, oh, I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste my time reading the Nazi Heidegger because that person's bad, or I don't want to read Deleuze because that is nonsense and anti-Hegelian or whatever it is that they don't like Deleuze for or whatever. So I don't want to be that kind of person. But on the other side of it, I don't have all the time in the world. So
right,
it's kind of the situation, man.
Yeah, that helps a lot. There's several things here, and I think the one I want to focus in on the most would be the time energy question. The fantasy of having the schole to read everybody in the canon and therefore be able to make an informed choice about who you reread multiple times, and doing so in the company and milieu of peers and tutors and respected, great, sort of elder type people is a fantasy. Now, places like Cambridge still exist, but they exist as a fantasy in a much more real sense than as a reality for most of us. Now, it was never really my fantasy. I didn't try very hard to go to something like that. Maybe I should have. Maybe it would have benefited me. But what I'm getting at is that I see not just like the desire to have gone to one of these Ivy League institutions as a formative fantasy for a lot of people in my life in autodidacts and whatnot, but sort of attached to that fantasy is this other fantasy of freeing up your time energy from labor power so that it can then become qualified as schole. And I see that as a hindrance more than anything else, because I think that when you say, I don't have the time energy to do that thing, and it's something that you really want, there's a lot more going on there than we initially suppose. It's not just a descriptive and propositional kind of statement. It is descriptive and propositional, but it's also performative and hyperstitional, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's an intensifier. What does hyperstition do? It intensifies coincidences. It's a coincidence multiplier. It's like when you buy the car and now you see the car everywhere. Okay. Mm-hmm. That becomes the self-fulfilling prophecy, because instead of strategically, taking up a sort of siege mentality and doing exactly what expediency demands so that you can better do what you're doing, you're instead giving yourself over to sort of defeatist, paranoid sort of mindset. Now, I'm not saying you're doing that, but this is something I've done. And it's something that I think a lot of people do, especially after reading about time energy theory. People say, I don't have the time energy to read this book. It's like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. You also don't have the time energy to do anything, but you still do stuff. All right. So not having large, reliably repeatable blocks of energy infused time that you are able to self-direct. It's instead, totally captured by wage labor. Sucks totally. But also, yeah, you can get from the job you're in to a job where you're able to listen to things if you're not already able to listen to things. You can get into a job where you're able to take more bathroom breaks. You can, look, there's always this stuff you could do, and I feel bad even saying this because it's like there are going to be people who are sitting here punching pavement crying about how they actually can't, though. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, well, fine. I don't really know what your situation is, hypothetical other person. But talking to you, Sai, I can say, saying I do have the time. I have more time than I've ever had in my entire life. Okay, well, would that actually be accurate? Would it be propositional? Would it be descriptive? No. But would it be performative? And would it be hyperstitional? Yes. And does that actually amount to something? It does. And so first of all, there's that. Second of all, it goes right back to what we were saying about giving oneself the time. So I did that in Waypoint. I gave myself the time, which is to say I stopped worrying about trying to achieve whatever it is that, you know, you're supposed to want to achieve at the point that you're getting your master's. And instead was like, I'm not trying to drop some kind of a book that could convince a community of peers. I'm also not trying to drop a kind of book that could, you know, change public perception of anything. I'm just going to develop myself in a more humble, limited scope and embrace that. And I'm not saying that that would be your solution, and I'm not saying that that's what everyone else should do. What I am trying to say is it's that giving oneself the time principle. So the line, you know, that was so it's given me a lot of mileage, you know, that I came to in Waypoint is I say, if we don't have time, then we really don't have time to act like we don't have time. And so we could be descriptive and propositionally accurate saying we don't have the time. But of course, then to act like we don't have the time, well, that would be a performance. But there's performance and then there's performativity. And I'm a lot more interested in the performativity power. And so really the proper English way to say it is performative power. But I'm trying to drive a distinction here between acting something out on the one side and on the other side doing what J.L. Austin is talking about in doing things with words. Or How to Do Things with Words is the name of it. It's a lecture series. And in that, you know, he develops the idea of performative speech acts, which are not propositional, strictly speaking. Now, that's not the same thing as saying that they're like magical and you're able to make things out of thin air like Rhonda Burns is The Secret. It's not like that at all. It's you know, when he uses this example of the judge saying the meeting is in session, and he says that this is a performative speech act, which is to say it's not descriptive and it's not a proposition. It's actually something that makes itself true if he's seen as having the legitimacy to say it by the people present. Everyone's kind of playing this game. Everyone's like locked into this. This is why Bourdieu uses this example, because people belong to this field. And if you're the, you know, guy dressed up in a clown suit going honk honk, the meeting is in session in the corner of the room. No, it's not. You know, you're just making. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Got to have the wig. Yeah. Got to have the gavel. Got to have the dress on. You know. Yep. And so, if you're saying I do have all the time and I do have all the energy, no, that's not going to be the solution either, right? So it's not. That would be the clown going honk honk. Right, I have the time. I have the energy. Right. But I do think that there's something that can be done to like give ourselves some breathing room. And so breathing room has been really important for me, especially in the last like 6 to 7 years. And so, you know, what we're talking about are ways of hacking time so that you have more breathing room. Part of the point of time energy theory is not just so that you aspire to have it and so the whole society then aspires to have it so that we'll then actually be able to make proper use of automation. Like, that's great. But it's also to give us some kind of breathing room. And so knowing that you won't have your skole in your lifetime, except for maybe a couple weeks at one point or something like that, that is more powerful than actually having your skole for the next 30 years. Because it means that you can start sharpening your knives and practicing basic movements that allow you to, once you do have those 2 weeks, actually put them to use.
Yeah. Really good point. Yeah. If I accept the paradigm that I will be just barely scraping that time out of wherever I can find it from here on, and then I get 1 week in a cabin like Descartes when I'm 59 or whatever, then I can write my book. I'll be fine with that. I'm fine with that. I only need an aspirational model like that, really. I think that's great advice. Appreciate that.
On this aspirational model note, I know that one of the questions that you had written down was about aspirational models. I think it's Yeah. Go ahead and ask that question because I want to piggyback on that. Yeah.
So I heard you say recently that you have at least 3 aspirational models or coordinates in your cognitive map that really light your fire. One is Marx at the end of his life for the last 30 years, and he is in the British Museum, the library of the British Museum, and he's turning over the three major problems or paradigms that he is working through: the British economy, French socialism, and German idealism. The next is an image, a beautiful image of Machiavelli in his personal library, donning his best attire, not even the stuff that he's wearing out in the square or going to work or whatever. He's wearing his Sunday best in the library, communing with the ancients, the people who came before and brought the wisdom to him that allowed him to write The Prince and other things. And Descartes, of course, famously a real one, if you can imagine it, a guy who had a lot of doubt, decided he's going to go away to a cabin for a bit and just clear away all of his false ideas, his presuppositions, and say, what do I really know? And he starts, well, he contributes greatly if it doesn't start, the Enlightenment or whatever. You could make a case that he does, right, with this action. So it's hard for me to imagine that you, of all people, Mr. Motivation, have difficulty getting things done because you've written this book, you have really bootstrapped your way here. But these thinkers obviously provide a lot of these images, I guess. They're images, really, of these thinkers, because it's not that you're really in love with everything they've ever done, right? But that at least just these actions seem purposeful. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. And so I love that you actually just shared those aspirational models. Those are the 3 that I've talked about the most recently. And the reason I wanted you to bring it up at this juncture here as we approach the close is because I want to leave people with some models, but then also in this idea that you're not going to have that skole in your lifetime. I wanted to say people have this aspirational model of being who? It's Immanuel Kant is really the guy. That's who they want to be. They want to be this guy whose life was like clockwork, where people could set their watches by the time that he would walk by their house every day. And he comes from this space of skole. He's a university professor and he gets to do his research and he really just has a peaceful life. Whitehead is like that as well when he describes his life. Like he had a life very similar to Churchill, which is just like pampered aristocrat in Britain, one of the top 70 families, old wealth. There's playing cricket, canoeing. It's a life spent going in these old buildings. A fancy lad, yeah. And that's cool. That's cool. We're not going to get a chance for that. So we should probably have a model that doesn't make us want to kill ourselves all the time. Because I think that when people have this skole model, it makes them want to off themselves. I really do. And the people who I could think of who are the most in the darkest places with this stuff, it's like, that's why. And it's like, look, I'm sorry you don't get to be Kant. Neither do I. I don't know that he even got to be Kant. And we don't know if any of these aspirational models are true. These could all be these people scraping by trying to be aspirational and hyperstitioning themselves into reality. But as far as like an expectation that you can like look to and get some kind of, hope from and also energy, I hope. Wittgenstein wrote the Tractatus, which is arguably one of the top 5 greatest works of philosophy of all time. Most beautiful, most succinct, most sound. He wrote it in the trenches of World War I. So he wrote it in the trenches, okay? When people go, oh, I have to have my skole to do philosophy. He wrote it in the trenches. Second of all, let's think about Tolkien. nothing he did would have come to be had it not been for also being in World War I. So like these guys did not have an easy life. Okay, so that's first of all. Second of all, what's the next most beautiful, succinct, just sort of epic, like it all fits together, everything's laid out just like this puzzle and it just all fits so nicely? Spinoza in his Ethics, right? Well, he wasn't in the trenches, but yeah, his scholae came from choosing a job that brought no recognition. It didn't bring all the monies, nice cars, and girls. No, he had a humble job like polishing lenses for like glasses, for spectacles, they called them. Okay. And because of that, he was able to just like get super into his ideas that he wanted to get into. Okay. Well, maybe that's not everybody's cup of tea. I'm just saying, Kant, it's not going to work. Trench warfare, though, yeah, that's a little bit more akin, perhaps, in spirit to what you're experiencing as a father of like new babies. It's a little bit more like trench warfare, I think. And so, I think that one of the benefits of thinking about these people is realizing, yeah, not all of them had that Kant lifestyle. Some of them were living pretty crazy lives and kind of were getting thrown around a lot. And so when people are like, oh, well, I have to have things in this way, that way, and the other way in order to do things the way that I think I have to be able to do it, it's like, maybe, but also bringing it all back around to the very beginning of this interview. Maybe that's your operative fantasy. Maybe that's the pleasure principle. And maybe it's actually how you keep undermining yourself, is because you have this sort of perfectionism. And maybe what we need is some mysterious third thing that's not just labor power, mundane, stripped down, and that isn't, on the other side, this purified, special, sacrosanct scholae. Maybe what we need is what we have, and it's something that we can actually make something out of, which is scholabor. It's not scholae, it's not labor power, it's scholabor. It's some third thing that I'm going to leave largely undefined, and I'm just proposing it here to say, yeah, no, you're listening to things with earbuds. You're able to juggle a lot of things. You're a multi-potentialite. And here's how you break out of just getting into one thinker. Realize that everything in your life has something epic that will help you think deeper and relate to it in a better way. Everything in your regular life. Like, think about like, oh, where's the broom? Nothing is where it's supposed to be. No, don't read Marie Kondo, as you said on Substack yesterday, I think. Don't read Marie Kondo. Of course, you can. She's fun, of course. No, but who should you be reading?
Yeah, Xenophon Socrates. Yeah, absolutely. We're working from Strauss's translation of that work this year, and it's been incredible, just incredible. Yeah.
In what way?
And I just think I love how the economy for me has been kind of stuffed into this Marxist register for so long. But the first thing that this book did was break out. I mean, what is the major critique, right, of like these types of framings? It's like, oh, what about domestic labor, or what Ivan Illich would call shadow work, or whatever, these types of labors that are not registered at all as wage labor. The reason I'm mentioning those is because in this dialogue you immediately realize that the things that you own end up owning you. For instance, there's this whole thing where like he's talking about an army. Well, if an army has pointed their guns at you, they're an awful and terrifying army. If they're pointing, if they're pointing guns that, at your enemy, then wow, applause. I love this. I love to see it. It has to do with the purpose of objects. It has to do with like their placement, but more importantly, your relation to objects. And obviously, I care about that as a Deleuzian. So, yeah, the fact that that book really just it puts to shame all of these like. Honestly, just to rag on Jordan Peterson for a moment. Yes, you should clean your room, bucko, but that's not going to, as Adorno would say, I'm going to miss it, but something about he who cleans his room so frantically might forget the shaky foundations on which it's built. And there's something about this dialogue which shows you that the house itself is very permeable. There's the market out there, there's the workplace there, and here you are in your house. I live and work from home, so it's kind of it matters to me that, you know, this sort of analysis and reflection on one's lived habitus or whatever, you know.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and sort of wrap it all up then, you know, have I read Xenophon have I read his corpus? No. Have I read this dialogue as many times as I wish I had? No. But I get to listen to it, and I get to re-listen to it. I get to re-listen to it, and I get to listen to it in longer trains of focus than most people working in universities today. And no, not as much of it sticks if I'm listening to it, but I get to re-listen to it, and I get to read it with my wife aloud. I mean, man, this is different, and it's something special, and it's something beautiful, and what, using this actual example, what reading it actually does is it makes putting your house in order like a inherently rewarding activity. It's like more beautiful and aesthetic. You think deeper about it, and you're not just thinking about it like the way you would with Marie Kondo. No, you're thinking about it with Socrates and Xenophon. Like, that's so cool. And it's like, well, it turns out childcare is also something where we have great historic voices. You know, it's not just you know, the Dobsons and the Pearls versus the Elfie Cones and the, you know, like these kinds of child rearing books, like the Montessori or whatever. Mm-hmm. No, it's like that we actually have like this rich soil that's just like beneath the surface of this pavement, and we could just kind of break through that pavement and sink roots if we just know where to look. And and there's a way to do it where we'll never have that amazing skole and the opportunity to achieve that fantasy in all those different ways. But good enough is pretty epic.
Yeah, it really is. Even just trying really hard to read it, that's so rewarding. It's so rewarding. Give it a try. Try a hard book. You won't regret it. I think we're both in agreement on not just try it because it's hard, but, you know, don't tell yourself you can't.
Okay, now, we didn't say this, but this is an intro to Waypoint sort of episode. It's just like a special way of releasing this new edition. And so, you know, you've narrated it. I appreciate that immensely. I just want to say, you know, you've got a great reading voice. I was listening to one of the chapters earlier today, and I was like, yeah, man, this is great. It makes it easier for it to go down in a sort of sense, because I could not listen to myself reading it. First of all, the audio quality was really bad. Talk about pushing the F it button and just doing something, and it was good enough. It was so bad. But also, maybe to some extent that's me, and it's my voice, and so, you know, but I appreciate that I get to hear it in your voice. I think this is awesome. You've made this awesome contribution to Theory Underground and to my work, and so I, you know, thank you from the bottom of my heart. To the people who are going to listen to it, you know, do you want to say anything to the listener as the narrator?
Absolutely. I will just say that this book was really important to me. I maybe, like some of you've heard Dave's theory of time energy, and you more or less rushed out to begin halfway implementing it. And I would recommend Waypoint because it sort of unveils where these things come from. There were so many blind spots in the things that I didn't know about. You know, I knew about Turkel, but I had steered clear of Heidegger. I knew about Levinas, but I hadn't really thought a lot about, you know, cancel culture since, I don't know, for like 5 years, right? We're sort of in like almost like in a post-cancel culture world. But there's I love the eclectic mix of what's in the book. It's not even really eclectic. I mean, there's truly a through line, but it is a collection of essays. But what's important is kind of seeing the development of a thinker. Like, I really respect you, Dave, and I respect that you were able to bring me a concept that immediately improved my life. That is not something that a lot of authors can do. I've read a lot of books where I'm like, I don't know what I got out of that, you know? So, A, glad that I could give back. But B, I think this is an important work that certainly if you keep going, people will want to keep reading this. So I really just would recommend it, especially structural stultification and psychological gerrymandering. I assume this is the first time you published anything about those two concepts. I think those are highly useful. So I would pay attention to those. And yeah, Godspeed. I think it's great.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much for listening or watching. Just your reminder, Canon Fest 2026. It's at the end of August. It's where you can get your hands on some of these collectible cards for my trading card game. You want to play in the tournament? We have a tournament league. And you could also just play casual or hang out and talk philosophy or big ideas or farming with people around at McKerracher Family Farm while everyone else is nerding out, playing games or talking philosophy. You could be picking my mom's brains about planting carrots, or you could be talking to my dad about building your own house, because that's the kind of stuff that we're doing with this philosophy of stewardship trajectory at Theory Underground. But also, we do intro to theory, intro to everybody in the world of theory. Theory Underground is the best place to remember how to talk about these things at an intro level. And if you need an intro level course into the world of theory and philosophy, well, there's no better place to do it, because literally there is no other place on the internet where you can get an intro to theory course. Theory Underground, as a part of its brand, cares about making stuff accessible. And so, yeah, if you want to get in on my lectures for intro to theory or philosophy of stewardship, or guest lectures, like Simon Critchley's giving a guest lecture. We got lots of great guest lectures coming up as well. Well, then the time is now. Make the move. Become an actual member at Theory Underground. theoryunderground.com/subscribe. That's how you become a member. $50, $100, $300. Those are the three tiers. How do I justify it? It's the best thing in the world. That's how. And because I like to run a small ship, and doing things in small groups makes it possible for me to be able to produce a bunch of quality content for you all on the free side. So that's how it works. And if you love the stuff on the free side and you're happy with it, then enjoy. Let me know down below. Make sure to comment and subscribe. Like it too. But listen, if you really do want to go deeper, that's how you go deeper, is become a member at theoryunderground.com/subscribe.